Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and this is meant to be the final Mission Impossible film, hence the title having the word "final" in it. But the weird thing about the Mission Impossible franchise for me is I don't look. I watch them maybe once, maybe twice, mainly in the theater, and then I don't watch them ever again. Because for me, I'm like, okay, I get it. The big hook is the big punchy thing about the Mission Impossible franchise since the fourth one is Tom Cruise does his own stunts and he does the crazy shit ever. He hangs him. He is on the side of buildings, the side of planes, different types of planes, helicopters. He's breaking his ankle just for entertainment. I get you. I get you. I get you. That's the hook, right? But the problem is for me is it's not on much on the story side of things. So even if like, I guess it's a spy film. A spy film has a simple plot, which is this is your mission. It's stop the bad guy to achieve this mission. That's mostly what the plot is. But what you can do is have candor moments. You can have all these things, out through the movie to kind of witcher the experience. And for me, I'm like, it's just action sequence on top of action sequence on top of action sequence. And to the point when it came to the last one, I wouldn't lie, I was kind of like, okay, more of the same. It felt more of the same. It felt just, and it was also action sequences that I've seen before. Like, I want to be that guy. Well, I will be the James Bond super fan who's like, well, actually, I saw that stunt in The Man That Dies. I seen that stunt in The Spy and That. Like, that's what happened in the last film. I was like, I saw that stunt before. It's a person that is actually the actor, but still, for me, I've like, hey, but it felt like been and done that, seen this before, and while this one decided to go a different route, it felt like they kind of were aware that hey, we still want to keep the elements that makes people want to go see this film, but at the same time, so let me just turn on the light. But at the same time, we need to kind of flesh things out. We need to have more like a sense of a story going on, and that's what we have here. Now, should this movie be nearly 3 hours long? No. Does this movie do a little bit too much of Remember the Times? Because here's the thing. If you want to ask me, does this feel like a finale? Does this feel like a full-on, this is the final Mission Impossible film? No. No. What it is? It kind of feels like if there's a ninth film, that this is the end of the first book. You know what I mean? This is the end of the first book, and then here comes the second book, if there's another Mission Impossible film. Because there's a lot of, like, it's in the trailers and all that, but it's like, trust me one last time, and Ethan Hunt, all your experiences for the last 7 films have led to this. There's a lot of dialogue of that, right? And I'm like, so clearly they're like, hey, let's kind of let's make it feel like if you've been there since day one, if you've been there since 96, for the last 28 years. That wasn't that hard of a math, because, hey, I'm as old as this franchise. But this, I just said a joke and I lost it, but it feels like if you've been there since day one, since the first film, that this is the award. That it's kind of going into the escalation route. That, hey, here's the final mission, or here's like the big, the final, like, big giant thing. And and the mission is quite big. It is saving the world. Because mostly, if I try to remember all the missions of the Mission Impossible films, bit of a tongue tied there, but all the missions of the Mission Impossible films are literally just get this device, stop the terrorists, secret codes, typical spy stuff, typical spy stuff, but that's essentially what it is, right? This one's the first, like, the world state. We need to save the world, and we got, like, it's AI. AI is the big bad, and we need to stop AI from we got 72 hours to stop the AI, the entity as they call it, and stop the entity because in 3 days, all the missiles around the world are going to launch off and destroy every human life that we know. And that's the whole mission. That's the mission of it. And because it's so straightforward, and knowing that this movie is all about the journey after the previous 7 films, the relationships between the 7 films, that it's more on that side of things and having more on the story side of things. I won't lie, I was more invested than I have been in even stuff like Fallout. Fallout, I thought it was good. I thought it was entertaining, but I wasn't like, oh my god, this is fantastic, because I was like, come on, let's get the meat in there, right? It's like, here's a dish. I'm liking some of the dish, but come on, I want some. I want my steak. You just give me salads. That's what it felt. That's what the Mission Impossible films feel like for me. It feels like I just got salads. Like, I want my steak. And this movie got the steak. A little bit rough. Once again, this movie didn't need to be nearly 3 hours long. They do hammer-handed the whole, it being the final, technically maybe the final film where, they do a little bit too much of that. There's some scenes where they just over-repeat things, and maybe it's a sense of like, look, there's a lot of, naturally for a Mission Impossible film, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in a Mission Impossible film. So, my guess, repeating dialogue or repeating scenes is probably needed for the audience to quickly understand what's going on. And because there's the whole, one example is, and it's in the trailers, that he's underwater. He's in this, like, diver gear. And it's a super high-tech diver gear, and they explain how the risk of it and what his body will do to, what will happen if he goes this far deep, or what will happen if he's not wearing the suit, and that type of thing. But the problem is, because that happens like, at least for the film, that happens like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, they had to slightly re-explain it just before he goes underwater. And it's just, for me, I'm like, look, I'm one of those writers who writes the one line that hopefully explains everything. So I'm that guy who's like, oh, the audience is smart enough, like, they're sophisticated, they can catch up on this. So for me, when I'm like, guys, you always explained this. You don't need to hammer us with, you don't need an extra scene to explain how the tech suit works. It's just in the width of it. You just don't. Heavy on the flashbacks, yeah, on the previous films, yeah. Heavy on trying to connect everything to everyone, yeah. Like, this character is connected to that character from the first film, or that device is now connected. That, like, hey, Rabbit's Foot is actually blah 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 blah. Like, you just go. You don't need to connect everything. Once again, it's trying to be the big finale. It kind of feels like maybe it's like, hey, this is the end of. If there's another, maybe it'll be like Bond, where it's like, hey, the first, the Sean Connery of the Ethan Hunt is Tom Cruise, and whoever's the next Ethan Hunt, and that's the next Mission Impossible. Maybe that's the side. Maybe that's the side of, maybe that's where they want to go. it is going to be interesting with this franchise because it doesn't end on like it gives you a big giant action sequence. It does give you this kind of finale kind of send off when it kind of feels like, yeah, we'll wrap things up, we'll wrap things up, we'll wrap things up. But at the same time, how the movie ends, it is not, let's say, a more modern take on the final movie. So it is interesting how they wrap it up. But I personally, like, knowing, once again, I'm not super crazy about this franchise. This is the one that I got the most invested in and was the most hooked into. Now, of course, I had to deal with the odd person who had to feel like they had to explain everything to their partner. Ugh. People, remember, the movie theater is church. Shut the fuck up. You know, if you think something's fine, giggle. If you speak to someone, oh, jump. It's fine. It's fine. But you don't need to super explain everything. You don't need to. But again, it feels, you know what? It feels like that you had the couple. Yeah, I had, like, in my theater, I had the couple who was their version of whispering is everyone else's loudness. Like, they weren't going, yeah, oh, that's kind of, yeah, oh, he's going on the water, oh, that kind of. It was kind of like, it was a little bit more like this. You're like, look, they weren't talking after the entire movie, and they, like, I would say, like, 10% of it, they were doing that, but still, I was like, there was one time, like, shut the fuck up. But anyway, remember, movie is church. God damn it, there's a key that looks like a cross, for God's sakes, in this movie. Anyway. Comment below, let me know your thoughts of this movie when you see it, because I think this movie in the US hits on the 22nd, so with Mission Stitch. I quit. Oh, Stitch Impossible. I created the new Barbenheimer. Stitch Impossible. Mission Stitch. Stitch Impossible. There we go. The final stitching. Anyway. Comment below, let me know your thoughts on this movie.